Hi, I am Mordechai Becher, and welcome to Dimensions of the Daf on JBS, Jewish Broadcasting Service, in which we deal with issues that are found in the Talmud and traditional Jewish sources. Every show is pretty much independent, so although it's a great idea, but you don't feel the need to have seen previous shows to understand this one, or see this one to understand the next one. Each one is a quantum unit of Talmud. And it's also I get a lot of enjoyment, pleasure out of the fact that I meet people when I travel all over the place who say, "Oh, I saw you on JBS," and it's actually gives me a lot of what we call in Hebrew nachas, a lot of pleasure in seeing that. So shout out to all people who shout out to me, and thank you for watching. So today we're going to talk about autonomous vehicles in Halachah, in Jewish law. As you probably know, there are vehicles on the road which have self-driving capabilities. Some top-model Volvos, Teslas, and I believe some Cadillacs have the ability to actually drive, meaning you get onto the turnpike and put it on auto drive, take your hands off the wheel, the brake and the accelerator, and it should stay in the lane and take you where you are going. Eventually, they are developing cars which will be more autonomous. That is to say that you may be able to just put in your destination on the GPS and it will take you there and navigate and do everything. At the moment, these cars you can take over control just by holding the wheel or something like that. But eventually I think they are moving towards completely autonomous self-driving vehicles. Think about it, folks. Can a computer be a worse driver than most people on the roads in New York and New Jersey? I think it's impossible. Computers are not homicidal maniacs. They don't have egos. They don't care if you merge or not merge. They don't care that you're going faster than them or not. They're just computers. So that's a big advantage. And according to I guess research done by various companies and universities, they feel that this will reduce casualties, reduce mortality, reduce road accidents. Certainly road accidents is due to, many of them, due to distracted driving, due to phones and texting and an argument with your spouse, and etc., etc. So given that this is a reality, which will just become more and more of a reality as time goes on, there are a number of ethical and legal questions to be discussed, which I know are being discussed in the secular world, but here is a little bit of a Jewish perspective. First and foremost, which I'm not going to discuss today, is what's your liability in terms of damages. It's your car, you started it, and you're in it, but you're not controlling it, and it causes damage. For whatever reason, causes damage in the public thoroughfare. Are you liable? Personally, I happen to think not, but that's not what I'm going to discuss today. What I want to discuss today is an ethical issue which is known in philosophy nowadays as trolleyology. By trolleyology, what I mean is that there is a trolley or a train on a track. There's two tracks. On one track, there are 4 people tied onto the tracks. Don't ask why. On the other track, there's 1 person. The trolley is heading for the 4 people. I have a lever, which I am standing on the side. I see a lever. I can divert the train to the track with 1 person. So it will, instead of killing 4 people, it will kill 1 person. May I turn that lever? In which case, effectively, I'm killing this 1 guy, but on the other hand, I'm saving the other 4. So can I do that? These are questions which I guess were first really contemplated in secular philosophy. They are discussed in the Talmud, but in secular philosophy it was debated during the Second World War. That is, the Germans shot V2 rockets, which the English called doodlebugs. They were 2-ton rockets with massive amounts of explosives, but they were not radar or guided. They did a mathematical reckoning, shot them from France to London. So the Nazis relied on spies they had in London to tell them where the bombs, the rockets, were landing. And they would relay it back. So the 2 spies that the Nazis had in London relaying the information were actually turned by the British Secret Service, MI5, I guess, and these spies were now double agents. So they'd feed information back to the Germans, whatever they were told by British intelligence. So the bombs The Germans were aiming these rockets for the middle of London, central London, which is where the government headquarters were, parliament, control headquarters, military, etc. And the upper echelons of the government lived there. However, the Germans got it wrong, and most of their rockets hit about 6 miles or so south of central London in a working class neighbourhood, causing, over the course of the war, approximately until France was retaken by the Allies, it caused about 6,000 deaths in London. The question was, do the Allies tell the spies to tell the Germans that the rockets are falling in the right place, central London, even though what it means is sacrificing the lives of people in South London? Or should the spies tell the Nazis, which would immediately save more lives in the crowded working class neighbourhood where the rockets were falling, but it would mean probably a great demoralisation and a hampering of the war effort if it would fall on central London. The decision was made to tell the spies to relay information that the rockets were falling in central London, even though they were falling south of London. And this was a classic moral dilemma that was faced many, many times during war, and certainly this was probably the dilemma of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. How many lives are we going to take by dropping the nuclear weapons on these towns? But on the other hand, versus how many lives are going to be lost if the Allied forces invade Japanese mainland. So this is a question, this created the field, I think it was Philippa Foot, Oxford philosopher, that created this field of study of the understanding of what we call trolleyology in America anyway. So there are two major schools of thought in philosophy regarding issues like this. There's what they call deontology, people who, like Immanuel Kant of Germany, who believe that there are certain things you cannot do no matter what the consequences. There are those, like Jeremy Bentham of England, who believed in what they call consequentialism. That is to say, the consequences is what decides what's right or not. If you get good consequences, then end justifies the means. And Immanuel Kant said, no, there are certain means that are never justified no matter what the end. For the final, you will not have to know those two terms, but just the idea is there. So anyway, if you look at the diagram, you'll see three diagrams of cars, A, B, and C. So clearly, and I think you understand already, that when someone is programming the computers for these self-driving autonomous vehicles, they have to make certain moral decisions as well. Have a look at diagram A. Here you have the car approaching a group of pedestrians who are crossing through traffic. This must be New York. And if the car swerves to avoid the group of pedestrians in the diagram, it will hit one pedestrian on the side of the road. The law-abiding citizen, he's a tourist, he's standing there waiting for the green light, but he's on the side. But you have to avoid these 10 pedestrians on the road. Do you program the car to do the trolley issue? It's exactly the trolley problem. Pull the lever. There's 10 people here. You pull the lever, it hits the pedestrian, one pedestrian. You don't pull the lever, the car plows into a group of pedestrians. What do? Not necessarily clear cut. What about scenario B? Who is sacrificed? In other words, let's say the University of Paris did a survey about this. The car is heading for a pedestrian who's crossed against the light. The only way to avoid hitting the pedestrian, if you see in diagram B, is for the car to turn immediately into a wall, which of course will endanger the driver and possibly kill the driver. So the car, would you program the car to kill the driver to save the pedestrian, or kill the pedestrian, save the driver? Now, frankly, I don't think I would buy a car that's programmed to kill me and save someone else. That would be you'd have to be a really good car salesman to get me to buy this car. And indeed, in surveys, most people agreed that they would not buy such a car. But here, again, so then you'd have to program the car to protect the driver, even if it means killing someone else, which is understandable, but is that okay? So in this survey done at University of Paris, they came to the conclusion that it would be a good idea to produce these killer cars. Why? Because in as much as we know that the overall number of lives saved by autonomous vehicles would be very high, we want to encourage people to buy autonomous vehicles. And if the only way we can encourage people to buy an autonomous vehicle is if they buy a homicidal car, which will protect them, then we are still, in the end of the day, saving more lives. So that will be a consequentialist argument. And then, of course, we come to C. So B is your life against another person's life. So you may choose to save your own life or the other way around. But what about C? Scenario C becomes a little more complicated. The driver is heading, again, for a group of pedestrians. I see here there are 10 of them. I think they're rushing to a minyan to pray. But anyway, the pedestrians are crossing the road. Your car is running towards them. The only way to avoid hitting them is if the car turns into a wall. So should the car sacrifice the driver to save 10 people in front of it, in front of the car, or should it just plow through the people to protect the driver at all costs? Again, I think most people would probably not buy a car that would plow into the wall to save the lives of these pedestrians. But on the other hand, it's one versus many. So those are some of the dilemmas. And if you look at the next beautifully illustrated diagram, you will see that this is the classic trolley problem, in which the trolley is headed for 5 people tied onto the tracks. You, standing there, can turn the lever and kill one person. That's one scenario. I'll give you a second scenario because it's relevant to the halachic analysis, which is you're on a bridge. The trolley is headed for the bridge. There's 5 people tied on the tracks behind the bridge. There is a rather large gentleman standing next to you. If you push him off the bridge in front of the train will kill him, but his bulk will stop the train, so you'll save the 5 people. Is there a difference between that scenario and pulling the lever? Not at all a simple thing to decide. So let's have a look at one or two sources regarding this. The first source is the Gemara in Bava Metzia, Talmud in Bava Metzia. Bava Metzia discusses the verse in Leviticus, which says, "Your brother shall live with you." That's regarding the mitzvah, the obligation to lend money to someone who needs it, etc. So it says, so that your brother shall live with you. Chei achicha imach. Your brother shall live. So the Gemara says the following. How does Rabbi Yochanan interpret this verse? The Gemara says this. He utilizes it for that which was taught. If two people are traveling in the desert, far from civilization, and only one of them has a pitcher of water, if they both drink it, they'll both die. If one drinks, he can reach civilization, but the other one will die. Is this person who's got the canteen or the camelback, is he obligated to share his water with the other person, in which case they'll both die, or can he keep the water for himself, in which case he'll live and the other one will die? The son of Petura taught, it is better that both should drink and die, rather than one should see his companion's death. Ben Petura felt that you should share it. It is wrong to keep it to yourself in this scenario, even if it means dying. You should share the water with your companion, and if you both die, you both die. Until Rabbi Akiva came. Now, from that language, until Rabbi Akiva came and taught, the simple deduction is that we do not agree, in the end of the day, Halachah, Jewish law, does not agree with Ben Petura. And that, in fact, is how virtually all Talmudic sages rule against Ben Petura in accordance with Rabbi Akiva. Let's see what Rabbi Akiva says. Rabbi Akiva came and taught that thy brother shall live with you. Your life takes precedence over his life. So how exactly he sees that in the verse is not totally clear, but one thing is clear, that Rabbi Akiva says you're not obligated to sacrifice your life to save someone else's. And there is another Gemara, which we have once discussed. It's a Gemara in Sanhedrin in which a Persian idolater told a Jew, he said the following, you kill that man or I'll kill you. So he said, kill that innocent third party or I'll kill you. So he went, this man asked his rabbi, what should I do? Terrible dilemma. And unfortunately, this dilemma has been repeated many times in history. And the rabbi said to him, don't kill the other man. Why, he says, how do you know your blood is redder than his? Maybe his blood is redder than yours. What does he mean? What he meant by that is that to get up and kill this innocent third party to save myself is really making a statement that my life is worth more than his. But he says you cannot make such a statement. Now, his life may not be worth more than yours, and your life may not be worth more than his. We don't really know. We can't give the relative value. And so, therefore, in a case of an absolute doubt like this, which is virtually unresolvable, then the correct course of action would be no action, inaction. Now, you could kill the guy who's threatening you because he is a pursuer. And if someone is trying to kill you, you can kill them. But the innocent third party, I keep pointing over there, there's no one there. Right, the innocent third party is not pursuing you, and therefore you would not be entitled to kill him. So we maybe have an answer at least to one of our scenarios. In other words, my car, I'm not obligated to ensure that my car crashes into a wall in order to save another person, because I don't have to give up my life to save someone else. Now, I should point out there are some exceptions. There are two exceptions to this rule, not necessarily relevant to us, but the two exceptions are, one would be in a time of war, in which a soldier would be obligated to do so, because for the very simple reason that war itself is a suspension of many of the laws of life saving and of life and death situations, because the job of the soldier is to put himself or herself in danger to protect the civilians. That's what war is. And consequently, in war, according to Jewish law, a lot of these laws are suspended, and you would be obligated to put your life in danger to save a wounded soldier, to save a fellow combatant, etc. That would be one exception to this rule. The other exception to the rule would be if you signed up for this in the first place, i.e., you are an infectious diseases doctor. You're a physician who specializes in infectious diseases. So you cannot now claim the exemption, yes, but it's dangerous for me to treat this person. Well, that's your job. You signed up for that. You're trained for that. That is why you are here. So that would not be considered an exemption. But in normal civilian life, when we are not infectious disease doctors, we are not necessarily soldiers, EMT, special forces, etc., then in general, we would say that we don't know what the value of each life is, relatively speaking, so you cannot make the declaration, my blood's redder than yours. So that means if your car is programmed to kill the other guy so that more people will buy it, and I could take control and turn into the wall and kill myself to save the other guy, apparently I would not be obligated to do that based on this statement in the Talmud, and based also on the statement that I mentioned from Sanhedrin. So that would be an answer at least to one of our questions. What if there's multiple people? What if I am saving multiple, there's one pedestrian over there, 10 pedestrians there. And the car is programmed to minimize the loss of life. So the car is going to turn into the one pedestrian and not kill the 10. So is that correct? Is that an appropriate algorithm to feed into the car? So if you have a look at the next source, is Maimonides in his Mishneh Torah. So Maimonides says the following: if Gentiles, if these attackers tell a group of women, give us one of you to defile. If not, we will defile all of you. They should allow themselves to be defiled rather than give over a single Jewish soul to these people. So that means that's very much what we would call, remember the term, deontology. There are certain things you cannot do no matter what the consequences. To voluntarily, to take one woman and choose a woman and say, you are going to be raped by this bandit, that you cannot do, even if it means that all of them are going to suffer the same fate. Similarly, if Gentiles told a group of Jews, give us one of you to kill, if not, we'll kill all of you. Unfortunately, this has happened in past. Second World War, it's happened, unfortunately, many times. Give us one of you to kill. If not, we will kill all of you. They should allow themselves all to be killed rather than give over a single soul to the Gentiles, meaning they cannot do giving over someone for summary execution to this group of people surrounding this group of Jews is not allowed, because that's considered to be tantamount to murdering this guy. How do you choose this guy and say you are going to die for the rest of us? You can't do that. However, this is an important caveat. If the Gentiles single out a specific individual and say, give us so-and-so or we'll kill all of you, different rules apply. If the person is obligated to die, like Sheva ben Bichri, who was a person who had been sentenced to death by King David, they may give him over to them. So if there's a guy who's got a capital crime, he's got a sentence on his head, and the police surround, they say, give us this guy or we'll shoot all of you, you can give him to him. Initially, however, this instruction is not conveyed to them. We don't tell them this initially. If he is not obligated to die, they should allow themselves all to be killed rather than to give over a single soul. So now we have a bit of an issue here. And the issue here is, according to Maimonides, the way he rules, it appears that we cannot evaluate one life versus many. In other words, we say, even though many people will be killed, that's the consequences, but that doesn't allow us to do an act of murder to save others. So, which is a very sticky situation. So, but the algorithm, I presume, would certainly choose many over one and would go for consequentialism. So that would appear at first glance that Maimonides would disagree with that totally. So let's have a look at the next source. I'm sorry I did not translate it, but I will, this is actually from a rabbi in Israel, a place called Bnei Brak. His name was Avraham Yeshaya Karelitz, and also known by the name of his book, Chazon Ish, which means the vision of man. So it's one of the greatest works of Jewish law of the 20th century, and he did a lot of work. He moved from Lithuania to Israel before the Second World War, and he was very, very revolutionary in the sense that he was one of the first people to deal with a lot of the issues that were confronted in a new Jewish state which had not existed for 2,000 years, i.e. the state of Israel. So this is what the Chazon Ish says, and I'll just tell you this. If you don't trust me, I do have the Hebrew here. But he says the following. He said, let's say you see something hurtling towards a group of people, and it is going to kill a large amount of people, multiple people. And you have the ability to turn it aside so that it will kill only one person. If you don't do anything, a number of people will die. One will stay alive, the guy on the other tracks. If you turn the lever, this guy will die, the other 5, 10, 20, whatever will stay alive. What should you do? So, of course, as you see, that's the classic case of the trolley question, which was our diagram, where you could turn the lever. 5 people on this track, 1 person on that track. Don't do anything, 5 people die. Turn the lever, 1 person dies. What should you do? So this is a very subtle distinction which the Chazon Ish makes. He says the following. It appears to me that this is not analogous to the case of Maimonides, who says you cannot give that 1 person over to the bandits, even if it means saving everyone. He says, you know why it's different? He says, because handing someone over for execution is tantamount to executing him. Handing someone over to be killed is an act of murder, or at least an accessory to murder or a lead up to murder. But it's basically a cruel action, which in this particular case, coincidentally will save lives. He says that you cannot do. To do an action which is an act of murder, which is intrinsically an act of murder, it's just that because of the circumstances it will save lives, that you're not allowed to do. Example, the person pushing the person off the bridge. The guy standing on the bridge, I push him off, pushing someone off a bridge in front of an oncoming train is an act of murder. Chazon Ish would say you cannot do that, even though circumstances are such that you will save lives by pushing him off the bridge, But pushing someone off a bridge in front of a train, that is an act of murder. You cannot do that, even if the circumstances are such that someone's life or some people's life will be saved by that. He says, however, turning the trolley, moving the lever, that is intrinsically an act of hatzalah, of saving. In other words, when I pull that lever to the side, why am I doing it? To save those 4 people. In other words, if there was no one tied on this track, it would be obvious I would do that. Of course I would do that, because it's intrinsically an act of saving. But that act of salvation, because of the unfortunate circumstances, will result in the death of that individual. So the Chazon Ish argues that where the act is intrinsically an act of murder, even if the coincidences or the circumstances means it will save some people, you cannot do it. If the act is intrinsically an act of salvation, even though the circumstances make it a case where I am going to kill someone, you may do it. So anyway, that's some initial thoughts about this. I have not yet bought a self-driving car, but if anyone would like to donate something to me for experimentation, I'm more than happy to take a Tesla. I prefer a Tesla. But anyway, or Volvo would be fine as well. Okay. But anyway, some initial thoughts about this, and that is my lack of conclusion. And have a great day. Thank you very much for watching. This is Mordechai Becher with Jewish Broadcasting Service, Dimensions of the Daf.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.